Good morning, everyone. We are live here at UUFDC for our Sunday service. Welcome.
Who's the other one? Oh, okay, sure. Yeah. Where does Mark serve? Oh, okay. That's wonderful. Okay, good. I'm so glad. Yeah, I mean, before I became the organizing strategy director, I was a news director in Minnesota, and so just learning for a long time to have that organization and I'm so grateful. And it takes a long time to build. It's a shifting mentality for many of our congregations. We're not necessarily always predisposed to play well with each other. Yep. I think that's right. Everything up here is doing the Lord's work. I appreciate it.
I'll get you guys some water.
Thank you. So now, are most of the folks who are here, year-round residents? I walked in the door and I was like, you must be Ashley. I was like, yes, you are in off-season, are you? It must be very busy.
Oh, hey, this is Mark Richards.
Hi, Ashley. Good to meet you. So nice to meet you. I was just hearing your praises being sung here for doing the work of taking over Wusan.
Oh, God. Yeah. I'm going to need your help.
We're here for it.
She knows, too.
I was just saying, yes, I ran the Minnesota network for several years. And now, finally, on my team, we have enough staff that we are actively able to really support the State Action Network. So
anyway, I wanted to shake your hand beforehand. I'm on call today, so I may get out of here before it's over.
Lovely to meet you.
Good to meet you, too. Thanks for coming.
Absolutely.
I think Tom has gone to San Diego.
We're live right now. If you're around, I'll talk to you.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, we'll talk. I'll talk to you if I'm still here.
Okay.
It's such a shift that's community online, and I agree. It's transformational though that we know the culture is not even. That's right, absolutely. And did folks, I know in some congregations it's more challenging, especially with the technology or the online. Is that effective here? Yeah, technology is some reason friendly now. It's I felt really lucky because almost all of my student career I've been working with because I lived in Chicago and serving the church in Fond du Lac, Juliet, and Minnesota. I was doing this job stuff, and now I'm national. So I felt really comfortable with the technology. an idea of how we're going to organize this way. And watching everybody else sort of make that leap has been so wonderful. Because I'm like, wow, we can do so many things that folks just don't figure out. Yep, that's right. But you can call it my partner, that's turbulence, but yes. Thank you for asking. Yes. And we are technically very happy, so I still use the word partner for ourselves. Thank you for asking. She is. She teaches at United Theological Seminary in St. Vincent, and she's affiliated with First United. So she's kind of all over the place. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, move our,
Yep. And what's the membership
Morning, James.
Hi. Why not?
Well, I'm hoping, I thought before COVID, we were going to try to get here once a month.
This summer. That's how I feel.
But actually it was good, but in a sense, it's funny. Even had a nice for 25. Oh, he jumped in the ocean. Well, we were. But most of the people in our hotel were so yeah, like 10 to 12 years. I always was up in go down to the dock, and the two boats are coming. And they're not big boats there, they're small boats. And then And they buy right off. Oh, yeah. I was stationed in Biloxi. Yeah, I was there for a year, going with my client. Well, they had all kinds of deals that once in a while, the head would still be on.
I'm not sure when the last time you did.
Okay, we're a little late here. I recognize you today.
Thank you, Carol. Very uplifting piece this morning. I've been told there will be sunshine today. So we'll see. It's nice to be back here. It's nice to be seeing people here live rather than disembodied Zoom images, which is great. It's starting to fill in. Welcome those at home. Welcome everybody that's here. And it's our custom to, before I begin, if anybody has any problems hearing, raise your hand and we will adjust that. Okay. It is our custom to welcome visitors, for people who haven't been here in a while, to stand up and say hello and introduce themselves and say where they're from. So anybody willing to stand? Thank you.
My family hasn't been here for well over 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Carrie, Lewis, Dan Lidke, and Ruth and Etta. We're happy to be back among you.
Good. Yeah. And they've grown up.
David Clowers and Janice Galt, again, haven't been here in about two years, I would imagine. Hope to be back at least once a month for the coming year.
Well, thank you. Thanks for making the journey up from all the way from Sturgeon Bay.
And Green
Oh, in Green Bay, of course. Yeah. Janice.
It's a two-car family.
Anybody else? Oh, that's great. Well, today's speaker is Ashley Horan, and I could probably spend the next hour talking about what Ashley has done and is doing for the UUA. The UUA president, the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, said of Ashley, quote, "Her experience in organizing bold actions, taking risks for justice, and weaving spiritual depth and growth and reflection for groups engaged in justice mirrors the understanding that the work of justice is inseparable from our religious and theological foundations." So thank you. For 7 years, Ashley has worked as the core staff of Beloved Conversations. And following that, she worked for 5 years as the executive director of Moose Jaw. I'm very jealous of the name. That's the state action network for Minnesota. Moose Jaw. How do you top that one? Now she is the UUA's organizing strategy director for the banner Side with Love, which, as I understand, encompasses UU The Vote and all sorts of other organizations on earth justice, LGBTQ rights, and other organizations. So she's taken on a lot. And I've seen Ashley on Zooms before for UU The Vote, and she is very good. So, and Ashley lives in Minnesota with her partner, the Reverend Karen Hutt, and their 2 children. So, now, at the back of our order of service doesn't have a lot of announcements. Does anybody have an announcements? And if so, Dave will bring the mic around for you. Oh, get to over here.
Help yourself.
There was an article in the Peninsula Pulse, the last one, about the Anderson building that is now the Hardy Gallery. I am concerned that the elders of that community do not understand how much that building means. It's iconic and it brings a lot of visitors to that community. And I would urge you to write to the chair of the board at Ephraim and urge them to understand how important this is for our community and all of Door County.
Yeah, Dave, I think Cindy has a follow-up here, which might work better now. Yeah.
As a trustee of Ephraim, I would like you to take that article with a grain of salt. There is no question the Hardy Gallery will remain. You do not need to contact us and write us other than we like to get letters. Do not be worried about it. We simply are we have a year to renew their lease. We have up until December to tell them that we are renewing their lease. There is no one on the board that will not renew their lease. We are simply getting more information about the historical aspects of the building. So as much as I love the Pulse, it had a tone to it that was not accurate.
Thank you.
Let's eat to beat climate crisis. I just want to remind you about the Plant-Powered Eating Committee and their display that is in the vestibule. There is a binder left. Otherwise, there are do-it-yourself kits in the white envelopes on the bottom shelf. And please do read your e-blast for the Dove Notes. Dove stands for Demonstrating Our Values Through Eating. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to take this opportunity just to remind folks that We are now back to the gathering room for coffee, not treats. And then at about 11:15, chimes will ring, and there'll be talk back on this side of the room to have further discussion about today's sermon. The chalice lighting. We light this chalice, the beacon that calls us to love, to justice, to a deepening of the spirit. Please stand in spirit or physically for the unison affirmation. We gather together to seek knowledge and wisdom, to explore freely the vast reaches of mind and spirit, to celebrate within a caring community those truths, ancient and modern, which give meaning and direction to our lives. That was humming with gusto. So this is the time in our service that we take the opportunity for anybody who would like to share a joy or relieve a burden with a concern. Does anybody have a joy or concern they would like to share?
Well, I had a particular joy about an hour ago when my daughter called from Idaho with her 2 little boys and asked me to read to them The Country Bunny and the Little Gold Shoes. I hope you have a copy of that, Carrie.
Well, Pam had Kansas and won $100 in the Cornerstone pool. And she graciously gave me back the $10 entry fee.
Now there's a joke. All right, thank you. At this time, Hank will give us a report on the pledge drive update.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I pledge allegiance to the flag. Oh, I grabbed the wrong pledge. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Give me a minute. Okay, sorry about that. Despite my clumsy and inauspicious start, this morning it's important to note that owing to the fellowship's unflagging generosity and efforts, it's truly had a banner year. We contributed $7,500 each to 2 local organizations in the first 2 quarters of our 25th anniversary community support initiative. We've raised over $8,500. In fact, Juliana told me this morning it was around $8,600 for our rather spur of the moment Ukrainian relief effort. And we've supported our ongoing and regular operations in a difficult year, seeing significant improvements to the building, new windows being the biggest example, maintaining our staffing at full levels, resuming in-person services, and as of late, inching ever closer to resuming our totally normal pre-COVID operations. We've even managed to improve our humming skills. We can all be proud. And now we're in our annual pledge drive. For reasons that Bob Lindell has already shared with you, and I invite you to check out the video that I think it was attached in one of the e-blasts maybe a week or 2 ago. We have a more ambitious pledge goal this year than last. And there are some reasons for that. First amongst them is, guess what? Inflation, which I think in the most recent months suggested an inflation rate of 8.5% year over year. You didn't need the most recent Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Price Index to tell you that, however. You know that gasoline's more expensive, Saw on the TV this morning, eggs are 60% more expensive than they were about a month and a half ago. And your home heating bills are higher. It's an inflationary climate within which we live right now. Our pledge drive ends May 4th. Means we're about 50% through it. Thus far, we've received pledges for about $70,000. That's about 45% of our goal. And the actual pledge units, we have 36 of them, about 35% of our goal. So we're looking obviously to get all the way up to that $153,000 and change. Amongst those who have pledged, by the way, are 4 brand new pledge units, people who never pledged with us before, which I think is pretty darn impressive. So, as Bob reminded us in the most recent email, if your form is still getting in the way of your on the counter or on the coffee table, help yourself by sending it off today, or you could drop it off here, as Buttons and I did this very morning. Let's keep that momentum that we established over the past year continue unabated. Let's not let all the good things we have done do and will do flag for want of funds. So please grab your pennant, fill out your pledge form now. That was pennant, pen, and. Took a while. Thank you.
So after Hank's gratitude and encouragement, it's now time for our offertory. We are now again passing the plate, so it will be passed around. But for those at home watching on Zoom, you can donate going to our website and using the donation button. So thank you very much for your generosity. Yes.
I believe this is a third Sunday, and aren't we starting to collect for the next anniversary?
Yeah, I'll comment real. Yeah, it is, and the third quarterly recipient is Help of Door County, which addresses that segment we had talked about, mental health in Door County. We had 4 different things: mental health, food insecurity, childcare, and housing. So it's Help of Door County. Let me also remind you that if you want to go ahead and dedicate or designate a particular offering now or later to Ukraine, you can continue to do so even on our Vanco website. Okay?
So very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Juliana, for bringing this to attention. So after the offertory, Ashley will take over with the moment of quiet. So thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's so good to be with you today. I made the trip from Minnesota yesterday, and I was nervous because they had predicted snow, but it turns out we've been graced with no, oh, yes, thank you. I forgot the mask. I'm just so used to it these days. I had clear roads, and I'm just delighted to be here for the first time with this fellowship. This morning, I don't have a specific reading, but I do want to spend a moment talking about the significance of this day in 3 of the great Abrahamic traditions of the world. This is not per se an Easter service or a Passover service or Ramadan service, but all of those pinnacle holidays are happening this weekend. And I want to just remind us as I go into this morning a sermon about democracy, about the power of the people to fulfill our inborn will to be free together. That we are in a season in which all of these great religious traditions celebrate the triumph of community over empire, that look at the will that is born within each of us to freedom, right? We look at the story of Jesus in the Christian tradition, one in which a wise person, a prophet, came and had a message of liberation, of community that he delivered, and that he did not hold alone. He had and amassed a community of people around him, and that message, because of that community, lived beyond his death at the hands of the state. In the Passover story, it is a story of the Jewish people, the Israelites, living under bondage in Egypt, a moment in which finally, after hundreds of years of being in slavery, those people came together, and with the help of inspiration, of courage from beyond just within themselves, they were able to break free, to move past the boundaries of oppression, of the state, of empire, and move into creating a society in which all of them could be free. So this morning, as we talk more about democracy and about our Unitarian Universalist faith, I just want to remind us of the context. Our faith draws from the sources, these living traditions of so many religions. And I want to invite us to recognize that we are among a great community of people with a wide diversity of beliefs across the world who are, in our own ways, commemorating this season of community, of liberation, and of freedom. So in that spirit, I invite us into this reflection about democracy this morning. So many of you know that we are Unitarian Universalists, such a long name, because the Universalist Church of America and the American Unitarian Association used to be two different denominations, but in 1961, they finally came together and merged. And at that time, any of you who have ever moved in with somebody who is not your own family know that when you try and set up house together, there are some negotiations that have to happen, right? So there were enough similarities between the theologies and the practices of these traditions that it absolutely made sense. But let me tell you, there were negotiations and negotiations and negotiations about who got to bring which piece of furniture and what kind of a culture and what kind of rituals were going to stay. So one commonality was that neither Universalism nor Unitarianism were creedal religions. There was no test of faith, no dogma that you had to espouse in order to belong. And the leadership who negotiated the merger then meant that they were not negotiating over the theology, but rather things like governance and mission. The original bylaws of the UUA, now there might be, and I'm guessing there are at least among you, some policy wonks who love a good bylaw. I am one of those people, but that's why I'm talking about it. The original bylaws of the UUA included a section that laid out what they called their corporate purposes, essentially what was the mission of this new organization. And my guess is that these purposes will likely ring a bell for you if you're at all familiar with our current 7 principles, which many people don't know are actually Article 2 of the Unitarian Universalist Association's current bylaws. So these original purposes, corporate purposes, included things like to strengthen one another in a free and disciplined search for truth as the foundation of our religious fellowship. Recognize that one? Mm-hmm. Or to implement our vision of one world by striving for a world community founded on ideals of brotherhood, justice, and peace. We've come a long way in our gendered language, but the concepts are still there. Now, nestled between these other 5 statements, there were originally 6, was this statement: to affirm, defend, and promote the supreme worth of every human personality, the dignity of man, and the use of the democratic method in human relationships. Now, to quote a Sesame Street song from my childhood, one of these things is not like the other. Out of those 6 principles that were affirmed in those 1961 bylaws, this is the only one that leads with a religious belief. The supreme worth of every human personality and the dignity of man. These are significant word choices because they were drawing from long legacies on both the Universalist and the Unitarian side. And they express one of the fundamental theological tenets that separated liberal religion from other forms of Christianity that were rooted in a fundamental belief about human depravity, that believed that humans were by nature sinful. So I'm going to use a $1 million seminary word here, seminary phrase, which is, we have to remember that this kind of theological anthropology, right, like what we believe about human nature, this was heresy in the mainline church for hundreds of years. The idea that humans were not, in fact, born out of sin, but were born good, that were born with incredible potential. So you have this in this first bylaw phrase, and from this grand, sweeping, lofty theological assertion, we make a turn toward a form of governance, right? It's a little strange. In our contemporary UU principles, which are, in the front cover of your hymnal if you want to look at them, you'll notice that the concepts of inherent worth and dignity, and then the use of the democratic process, they've been separated out. They're in separate principles now in our first and our fifth principle. But I gotta say, I think we've lost something in untethering them. So listen again. To affirm, defend, and promote the supreme worth of every human personality, the dignity of man, and the use of the democratic method in human relationships. It's an if-then statement. If we believe that humans are endowed with inalienable worth and dignity, then we must acknowledge that truth by creating institutions and societies in which every person is equally empowered to weigh in, to determine as a part of a collective what is best for the people. If our theological anthropology is one of blessedness and potential and not sinfulness, then our polity, how we govern ourselves, must be democratic. As the great 20th century Unitarian theologian James Luther Adams wrote, freedom requires a body as well as a spirit. We cannot live by spirit alone. A purely spiritual religion is a spurious religion. It is one that exempts its believer from surrender to the sustaining, transforming reality that demands the community of justice and love. This kind of sham spirituality, far more than materialism, is the great enemy of religion. Now you should know about Adams that this belief was forged in the fire. He was a young man and he was headed towards seminary and ordination when he went to Germany for the first time to spend time studying and learning during the rise of the Nazi Party there. Over the course of several periods and trips, he witnessed up close the descent of that nation into authoritarianism and fascism. He had many close encounters, was stopped by the Gestapo several times, and witnessed the violence and the repression of the Nazi regime. But he also witnessed something he thought was as insidious, which was the widespread apathy among the church, among clergy and lay people, to do anything in resistance. He wrote, "We are fated to be free. We cannot escape making a choice, nor can we escape the responsibility for the choices we make, any more than we can escape their consequences. We cannot hide behind someone else's authority or choice. We cannot escape from freedom or its responsibilities. Even when we attempt to do so, it is an act of freedom. Freedom is our fate as well as our birthright, and we cannot, even if we wish to, slide back into vegetability," he says. Vegetability. There are so many times, y'all, that I find myself wishing for vegetability. In my paid work, as Jim said earlier, I serve as the organizing strategy director at the Unitarian Universalist Association, the modern version of that organization formed in 1961. And in that work, I basically lead the team that runs all of the outward-facing social justice work of the denomination. Side with Love, You the Vote, Create Climate Justice, Uplift LGBTQ Ministries, Love Resists. And I often joke that those of us who get paid to fight oppression and nurture a more just world will not be out of a job anytime soon. And unfortunately, though, what underlies that glib kind of comment for me is a sprinkle of cynicism on top of a lot of weariness and the occasional dash of despondency. In weeks like we've had recently, when attacks on abortion access and trans people are happening in so many states we can't even keep track, when the political polarization is playing out as these nauseating, sexist, racist attacks toward the first Black woman ever nominated to serve on the Supreme Court, when extreme weather events remind us of how close we are teetering on the brink of irreversible climate catastrophe, I would very much like to slide back into vegetability and figure out who the real grown-up in the room is so that I can go pull on their pants leg and ask them to make it all better while I watch cartoons on the couch. This is why my personal mantra over the years, though, has become, we must take shifts for the revolution. The work of justice making, of incarnating the beloved community, is one for which we are neither solely responsible nor exempt from engaging. In other words, the faithful response to the blessing of being endowed with both freedom and dignity is to find your people and collectively take up the work of fighting for a society in which the potential in each of us is realizable by all of us. James Luther Adams wrote, "The free person's faith is not merely a faith in oneself. It is a faith in the capacity of sincere persons to find freely together that which is worthy of confidence." Like most of the great political philosophers, Adams is saying that humans are far more likely to make choices that benefit everyone when everyone has the power to engage and discuss and ultimately decide together how we will live. As history has shown again and again, when power is concentrated in the hands of the few, whether it's an oligarchy or a monarch, a ruling class or an authoritarian regime, the result is structures that privilege those who wield the power while ignoring or oppressing everyone else. This, my friends, is why all of the defining struggles for justice right now are inextricably linked to questions of democracy and power. A majority of Americans, for example, believe that abortions should be legal and accessible. And yet the fate of Roe v. Wade is currently in the hands of 6 Supreme Court justices, a Supreme Court whose balance was shifted for a generation by a president who actively attempted to overturn the results of a popular election and fomented an attempted coup. The developing countries of the world, representing the majority of our human population, they plead again and again for global policy to mitigate the devastating impacts of climate change and environmental devastation. But their demands are repeatedly denied by a handful of Western nations like ours, whose disproportionate power and wealth make it possible to continue their disproportionate carbon emissions and consumption of resources. Meanwhile, gerrymandering and voter ID laws are proliferating across the country, resulting in massive disenfranchisement of poor folks, of communities of color, of citizens returning from incarceration, and more. Like James Luther Adams witnessing the German slide into Nazism of the 1930s, we are also at a crossroads in human history, and we must decide whether we will fight for our collective human freedom and potential, or let it slip away and bring about the end of civilization as we know it. Fortunately, y'all, my word of hope this morning is that I see the signs that we Unitarian Universalists are ready to answer the call and join in faith and force with so many others who share our yearning for a different kind of world in which all of us are free. In my role as Organizing Strategy Director at the UUA, I have the privilege of working with a brilliant, visionary staff team that is taking to heart James Luther Adams' assertion that one of the primary tenets of the free person's faith is that the achievement of freedom in community requires the power of organization and the organization of power. Through Side with Love and the campaigns that we run, we are collaborating with UU individuals, with congregations, and with UU organizations to build a humble, skilled, nimble base of faithful people who are deepening relationships of trust and accountability, along with community partners and impacted communities. We are building our collective power to impact the most critical issues and movements of our times. Last weekend, hundreds of Unitarian Universalists joined us online for the national launch of UU The Vote 2022. We heard from our volunteers and from congregational leaders and from secular and multi-faith partners about what the landscape looks like this year, how we can build together to make real impacts that will make all of our other work for justice possible in the coming years. In 2020, I don't know if you know this, but Unitarian Universalists gathered together, and more than 450 of our congregations, 5,000 individual volunteers, collectively registered 10,000 voters and contacted more than 3 million people in advance of the elections last year. Together, we committed collectively to showing up again this year, to deepening our skills, to calling and texting and phone banking, and yes, this year to door knocking in person in our communities, to shape the public discourse, to fight for our democracy that is so at risk of collapse. This is the kind of commitment that buoys my heart when despair in the state of the world threatens to creep in. When our Universalist and Unitarian forebears sat at those negotiation tables leading up to that 1961 merger, this is what I imagine they envisioned when they declared that one of the core purposes of our faith was to affirm, defend, and promote the supreme worth of every human personality, the dignity of man, and the use of the democratic process in human relationships. With all its shortcomings, and all the ways Unitarian Universalism has failed to adequately respond to some of the deepest evils in the world as it is, there's so much to be fixed and repaired and addressed in our faith. And yet, I think this moment in human history is offering us a chance to truly lean into our potential, to be a part of building what James Luther Adams called the society that gives every person the opportunity to share in the process whereby human potential is realizable, that creates the social forms of freedom in community of justice, that respects the divine image and dignity in each person. As this congregation celebrates your 25th anniversary, I hope that you see yourselves as a part of this shared project to fight for democracy and to build a world in which all of us are free and flourishing. You are small, but you are also very mighty. And we need you in the struggle. You are lucky to have leaders like Jim and so many others who are creating organizations like Busan, who invite UUs into the power of organization and the organization of power, where you can put our shared faith in the worth and dignity of all our human siblings into action through the practices of living embodied democracy. I offer you all my congratulations this weekend, my gratitude, and I am so grateful to be a part of this shared work together. As we end, I offer you this blessing from the Reverend Parisa Parsa, who says, "May we guard and protect our democratic process and deepen and with the divine. May it be so. Blessed be Ashe and Amen. As we extinguish this chalice, I offer to all of you the hope of the light of community, the commitment of our faith, and the promise that together we can shape a world in which all of us are free.
And just a reminder, in about 15 minutes, the chimes will ring and we will have talk back following Ashley's very powerful and meaningful message. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us live. For those of you that are live, we hope to see you at the talkback, which will be starting up soon.